if you don't have a clear idea of what you're going to sell and who you're going to sell it to, then you're probably not ready to get going.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Vagrant Coffee HustleCast. It's Josh and Jared, and today we're going to be talking about business, specifically what makes a business. How do you start one?
Yeah, this is kind of our behind the scenes part one. So the goal today is to talk about all of the things that you have to think through before you actually get your business off the ground, before you file that LLC.
Yeah, so from us, we're thinking through our history and what made our business successful, and we thought we'd talk through some of those pieces and try to discuss or perhaps generate ideas for other people who want to start their business as well. But it kind of starts with this idea of what is the grand scheme? What is the big vision of your business? Is it that you want to start your own little company that you work for, or is it something that you want to grow into a bigger organization and maybe have employees and a bigger structure around it?
Yeah, I think that's something that that we definitely did right at the beginning. We kind of had what that end goal looked like, and so we knew how we were building. But that's such an important piece that a lot of people don't think about. If you want to start a small business in your house, is that all you ever want it to be, or do you want it to grow into something bigger? Are you going to move into a production facility? Are you going to hire employees? So those kinds of things are critical in thinking through as you get going.
And it doesn't really matter so much of what kind of business you want to run.
Right.
It could be, in our case, coffee, obviously, or it could be, I don't know, making handmade soaps in your house. It's one of those things that you want to think through before you get started. Sure, I think a lot of people go with something that they enjoy, like a hobby, and say like, oh, I really enjoy blank. I enjoy potting plants. I enjoy making soaps or whatever it is. And they think like, oh, well, maybe like right now, when, in the middle of coronavirus, they're thinking like, oh, well, this is something I can do. This is something I can start, and maybe some friends will buy. Maybe some other people will buy. Or at least in our case, we thought not so much of maybe this is something that our friends can buy, but maybe this is something that we can really grow into a really big enterprise and maybe make it be a little bit bigger than ourselves. But I think that it's one of those differentiating things that you got to think about when you start a business. Like, is this something that's going to be just for me? Or am I going to create something that is going to outgrow me?
Going to outlast you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, for both of us, we want to build something that at some point we can step away from, whether that's in retirement or before that, who knows. But something that we can step away from and it will continue on beyond us.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. It's not the right answer versus the other way being the wrong answer. That's just our goal for our business.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to think through what your goal for your business is.
Yeah. And I think also we've met lots of people who wanted to start a business of some sort, maybe a product, and then sell the business. I think that's really, really popular nowadays.
Yeah.
If you're really good at creating a special type of mug and you think, oh, I can create this mug and then I can sell that technology, I can sell that idea to another company, and then I'll just cash out and be done. I think we've encountered, I don't even know how many businesses that we've gotten to know the owners over time who really, really want to grow something and then sell it.
Right.
So that way they maybe cash in on whatever the value of that product or that company or that patent is worth, and then maybe do something else.
You'll see a lot of times that can either be the product itself or a brand. A lot of people are brand building, and then they can sell that brand onto a bigger company that will then operate that brand.
Yeah. People who do that in kind of a cyclical pattern or have gotten that term serial entrepreneur,
Right.
where they just want to start a company, grow it to a certain level, and then sell it off, and then start another one.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's certainly not something that we have sought out to do from the beginning. I think that what we wanted to do was we want to start a company, something bigger than us, and then grow that to a certain place and stay with the company for the foreseeable future. So we're not looking to sell off the company. We're not looking to work in it with just us, but instead grow it to be a sizable enterprise with employees and that sort of thing. And that's something you really got to think through when you get something started.
Yeah, and the business can take so many different forms, so many different shapes. There's all kinds of categories of businesses. We think about even like buying a franchise. Like I had so many people tell me when I was looking at starting a coffee company, what does it look like to just buy a franchise? And you get a package deal. Here you go. This is all of your marketing material. This is the area in which you can operate, versus something like starting from scratch, versus multi-level marketing or direct marketing situation. Like there's so many different forms that business can take.
Yeah.
And you really got to be specific, and you got to know what your goals are for your business and what you want that to look like.
But it's also okay to change. It's
Absolutely.
also okay to get started on something and realize, oh, this isn't structured the way that I want. I want to kind of tweak it, which is going to be way easier to do earlier on than it will be down the road after you have a lot of product or raw materials or employees. That's a little bit more tricky to change.
Yeah, and even when you create a plan, it's important to be flexible, because sometimes pivots have to happen if you're going to stay in business.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can think about the last month, we've had to do a lot of pivoting with the coronavirus, just so that we could stay solvent, just so we could keep our noses above water. So all the planning in the world is fantastic and it's important, but you also have to be flexible when it's necessary. I think that's important to remember.
So for us at Vagrant, we are technically a company now for 3 years. We've hit our 3-year mark, which is great, hooray. However, the idea for Vagrant is a lot older than the 3 years that we've actually been a company. When we started thinking about this together, it was about 5 years ago, and we were able to take some of our independent ideas that we had for this and start to flesh those out into what does it look like to create a brand, a company, and have that grow. It's not as simple as buying the equipment or buying the supplies and then just going, but instead, without that structure, that vision behind it, we wouldn't have been able to get to where we are today.
Yeah, and there's a lot of big business terms that get thrown around that sound a little overwhelming, and they're not terms that we knew necessarily when we started this. But looking back, we were able to think through a lot of those things, and a value proposition is one of the big things that you hear people talk about a lot. What is your value proposition? And that's really a fancy way of saying, what is it that your company is going to offer that people are willing to pay for?
Yeah.
Which, when it comes down to it, that's the essence of business. That what are you exchanging for money from your customer?
And that could really be like a product that you make. It could be an idea that you sell, something that you're exchanging money for. It could be that you spend a little time figuring it out digitally or an actual physical product. It doesn't really matter in that regard, but something that you intend to sell. So, and it's not just something you intend to sell, because you could sell ice,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that somebody's going to want to buy it.
Right.
So,
or want to buy it from you.
Right. So that is the essence of the value proposition.
Right.
Not even so much what can you make,
Right.
but what will other people buy from you.
Right.
Yeah.
So part of that is, what is your differentiating factor? Maybe there's 100 ice sellers on your street. Why are people going to come to you to buy ice as opposed to the guy next door.
Right.
That's kind of a weird example. I don't know how many ice.
Well, that's definitely the case for coffee.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
coffee is almost as common as ice. So for us, we got asked that question a lot.
Right.
Why would somebody buy coffee from you? You can go here, pretty much anywhere,
Right.
and get coffee. Why would people buy it from you?
Yeah, and I think that the question we asked ourselves when we were looking to answer that is, what can you be the best in the world at?
Yeah.
If you find something that you can be the best in the world at, even if it's the best ice seller on Key Highway, whatever that is, you latch onto that and you make sure you're the best in the world in that. And for us, that was, how can we do quality coffee anywhere?
Yeah. And that was a huge differentiating factor.
Right.
If you are into the specialty coffee world at all, then you'll understand that there's a big difference between commodity grade coffee and specialty grade coffee. And for us, we wanted to stay specifically in specialty grade coffee. We knew that that is a fast growing and pretty much the only growing segment of coffee nowadays. The commodity coffee industry is starting to slow down a lot. So we wanted to be in that space. We did the research to determine, hey, this is the aspect of coffee that we want to follow. But a huge piece for us was that differentiating factor of, well, a lot of people drink specialty coffee from whatever place, but it's sometimes hard to get in certain places. Maybe that's because it's tricky to brew, and you have to really pay attention to all of the pieces and the formulas and the equipment in order to make it really great.
Right.
And that sometimes is like a non-starter for
Right.
people.
And for a lot of coffee shops, the idea behind a brick and mortar is you are able to control all the variables. You have the equipment that's really heavy to move. It's really specific to this industry.
Not to mention expensive.
Not to mention expensive.
Yeah.
So the brick and mortar cafe environment is a way to control as many of those variables as possible. And our idea was, okay, we know it's possible to do what a cafe can do outside of it, even if it's hard, and that's what we want to be the best in the world at.
Yeah.
So that was our differentiating factor, and that's what we have kind of latched onto, what we can be the best in the world at.
Yeah. So we decided to build our equipment in such a way that we would be able to take those elements of fine-tuned control in a cafe and then do them outside of a cafe, which is really simple of an idea, but it's really complicated and complex to pull off.
Right.
So that for us has been a gigantic differentiating factor.
Sure.
Yeah.
And getting back to pivoting, the brick and mortar cafe environment was never our goal.
Right.
But as we kind of went down this, how do we do coffee anywhere, we realized that it was important for us to have a hub, to have a place that we can restock, that a place that we can reset, get all of our equipment ready to go. And so that's how the cafes came about. That was a pivot within, we're still within our vision of what we want Vagrant Coffee to be. But the pivot was adding the brick and mortars, and that's just still to support what we think we can be the best in the world at.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So beyond a value proposition, once you've figured out what it is you're going to sell and how you're going to sell it and how you're going to stand out from the rest of the people that are in that industry, the next piece, I guess, is who are you going to sell it to? Who's your target market?
Yeah.
And that's a critical piece. If you don't know who that person you're marketing your product to is, you run the risk of just trying to please everybody, which is a scenario that almost never works unless your name is Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart or Pepsi,
Right.
or any of those gigantic brands that have been around for a long time. They kind of figured out how they can get that gigantic group of people, but even then they have limitations.
Sure.
So for us, as we identified who that market was, it was taking a specific look at more than just who likes coffee.
Right.
They say 80% of adults drink coffee, which is great, but believe it or not, 80% of adults don't drink the same coffee. And so those are pieces that we actually had to look into and figure out, like, okay, this group likes this, and this group likes this, and this group like this. Which one is the one we're going to aim at?
Right.
Yeah, and that was not a small thing. That was a really, really big choice to realize if we aim at this group, we are going to be alienating a different group.
Right. And that's that's a constantly moving target because that demographic is shifting all the time. But B, that it's so nuanced, and again, there's no right answer and wrong answer.
Yeah.
What we've chosen to focus on as our target market may be different than another coffee company's target market.
Yeah.
And there's so many variables, so many pieces you've got to look at to decide that. Because we know that the specialty coffee is the only growing market, we definitely wanted to be in that vein of people that like craft and quality coffee, as opposed to looking at maybe a bigger group of people that are drinking lower quality coffee, but it's an always shrinking group. And because we have intentions for this company to go on for a long time, we don't want to be focused on a group of customers that is constantly shrinking year over year.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of pieces to think through, but they're really important pieces to think through. And these are all things that have to happen before you start. If you don't have a clear idea of what you're going to sell and who you're going to sell it to, then you're probably not ready to get going.
Yeah, and for us, that meant specifically when we got started, taking a look at our product and recognizing, does this product actually connect to our target market? We had an idea that it would. But not only that, but with what we were doing with doing specialty coffee outside of the cafe, we were not necessarily in control of who was going to be drinking our product. And so throughout our journey, we were looking at our roasting process and our brewing process to determine, are we doing what our target market wants, and is our target market the actual people who are buying from us? Right. And that changed a lot of how we do what we do without necessarily impacting the who we're aiming at.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a really, really tricky thing for us coming from a really high-end specialty coffee world. Like, are we doing what the customer is wanting, or are we doing what we're wanting, and how do those interplay with each other?
Right. And that's really, again, where you got to be flexible. If we had been only pour over coffees that take 5 minutes per cup, and it was the highest quality bean ever, and they were $9 coffees, we're in scenarios where our customers are saying we don't have $9 to spend or 5 minutes to wait.
Yeah.
So what is it that you can offer me right now for less money? So those are the things, as we identified our target market and we knew generally we want to be in the craft coffee world, how do we match those two up? And for us, it definitely wasn't 5-minute coffee at $9.
Right.
It was 60-second coffee at the most, and selling package deals. And that for us was a big shift. Instead of selling coffee by the cup, where every single customer, you have to have that transaction time built into the time you're making the coffee. Now we're just selling the entire package. We're saying we're going to be here for an hour.
Yeah.
So that was a shift for us too, in figuring out what our customers want.
Absolutely. And I think one of the pieces that we haven't necessarily gotten into is the effect that it can have on you personally and emotionally. Because you start a business because it's something that you care about and something that you really want to do. And so you have this dream and this vision of like, oh, I really like this, or oh, I have some data behind this being a good thing. I want to bring this to the world, and I know that other people will just enjoy it. And then you get there, and then maybe people don't.
Right.
And they start asking you questions like, why do you charge so much for this? I can get this cheaper at the gas station down the street, or, this place gives it out for free, and you all want what you want for it. Or this isn't the flavor preference that I prefer. Do you have anything else? And for us, especially when we're out doing an event, no, we don't. Like, this is what we've got. It would involve so much more equipment and money and figuring out our whole system to offer more. And that can hurt sometimes when you're encountering somebody who says like, "Oh, I don't like your product that you've just spent years and thousands of dollars building." But it's not, business isn't personal. This is just people's buying habits and what they prefer and what they like. And sure, I think you can kind of go two different ways with it. You can go the way of like, nope, I like what I like and I'm going to do what I can do and that's going to be it. Or you can say, all right, I hear what you're saying. I understand that you want something different. Let me see what I can do to tweak that and to make it maybe a little bit more enjoyable for you, which isn't really even a bad thing to think about. It's just understanding and processing, like, how do I want to make this business run? And what is my overall vision and goal? And is what the customer is asking for going to compete with that? Or is this just a part of the journey?
And that's why it's so important to have some of these bigger questions answered before you start. Are you willing to maybe not make things the way that you personally prefer so that you can appeal to a wider group of people, which will theoretically make your business more successful?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be very, very focused on the thing that you're super passionate about? And maybe you'll have to charge more because you're getting less customers through the door. So those are pieces that will all, like, your entire business is going to be affected by how you answer these initial questions and how willing you are to be flexible on those questions.
Yeah. And so when identifying the target market of like who you're gonna sell to,
right,
and figuring out some attributes about them, what are some things that we have learned through the process of like how to do that really super well?
I mean, I think one of the things that we've noticed is there's kind of two parts to it. There's the marketing part, and then there's the actual part.
Yeah.
Right. We have our aspirational customer. Kind of the brand is built around this is what it's targeted towards, even though that's not necessarily the majority of people that walk through our door.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really like the business entrepreneur kind of scene world. Those tend to be the people we hang out with and talk to, and that's kind of been our aspirational customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
When that's not necessarily 90% of the people that walk through the door.
Yeah.
So I think you got to separate those two things: the marketing piece and the actual piece.
Yeah. I think that we have taken a look at the people who come through the door and tried to identify who do you want to be.
Right.
That's been a really big piece for us figuring out our target audience. We work in coffee, so we see a very wide variety of people. Coffee is a relatively easy thing to jump on board with. It is a comfort item for a lot of people. But then we started to look at the actual people who are buying this and are trying to figure out, okay, who do you want to be? What are you trying to accomplish in life? And how can we help you get to where you're trying to go? Right. And then once we were able to identify some of those factors, we were able to kind of figure out our place of how can we as a company help that person get to that place. But obviously you can't help everybody get to every place. And so we decided, okay, based off of who we want to be and the general idea of who's coming in our shop, okay, this is who we can identify as our target person, which tends to be a more business-focused, driven, you're motivated to accomplish and do something.
Right.
It could be a lot of different things. It could be writing a book, could be starting a company.
Right.
But somebody who's motivated and driven to do something.
Right. In whatever industry they may be in. Because we're in our stores and where we operate are in such wildly different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
In the Fed Hill neighborhood, our customer looks very different than our Station North neighborhood, which looks very different than all of our mobile and events type things.
Yeah.
So it's when we were thinking through who our target market is, it was not necessarily a specific age and salary demographic. It was more of a mentality demographic.
Yeah.
And I think that's been important for us to recognize as we have to operate in very different types of neighborhoods.
But I also think that it had to do with, we looked at who was buying, and we kind of had to shift a little bit the mentality of like, okay, this person who we've identified as our target person ideally has an income of this much, and this is how they're able to purchase these things.
Right.
But coffee is a little bit weird in that regard, where not everybody necessarily has an ideal financial situation when they're buying coffee. Sometimes it's just something people want so bad that they're willing to spend even beyond their means in order to get it.
And students is a great example.
Absolutely.
Students are not high income folks usually.
Right, but they do drink a lot of coffee.
coffee.
So it's a little bit of a shift to realize like, oh, okay, maybe our target audience doesn't have a standardized income situation.
Right.
Maybe it's something else that drives them to make these purchases.
Yeah, and coffee, what we found is it's kind of that little luxury that sometimes if you can't afford a 5-star meal, well, you can afford a $4 latte. Like,
right.
That's kind of the little luxury, and that's actually what's helped in kind of recession times.
Yeah.
When the economy goes down and people stop eating at those 5-star restaurants, that's that last little luxury that they can still hold on to, and it's been really good for us.
Yeah. And then another piece of that would be what we've done with businesses. So coffee is one of those, like we said before, a comfort item.
Right.
And so we have found a lot of people essentially gift coffee in one way or another to people because they really appreciate that for whatever reason. I mean, it might be the caffeine or whatever, but people really appreciate that kind of gift that speaks to them in a personal way. And so what we find is a lot of businesses really want to be able to touch people in that kind of a way. And so it's still fitting in that demographic idea of like the target audience, but it's been a way for us to be able to connect to other businesses and say like, hey, you want to reach people and you want to connect with them in a special way, here's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, so again, I think these are all questions that it was really helpful for us to think through a lot of these before our first day of operations, before we went out in the world, started saying, hey, we've got this coffee for sale, who wants to buy it? I think next week we're going to talk about maybe some of the more nitty-gritty, hands-on parts of starting a business.
Yeah.
But unless you know this part, you're going to be behind the curve when it gets to that next part.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to have that big picture of your business, you want to have your value proposition, and you want to identify your target market, or else the rest of it is going to be really difficult to pull off.
Right. Yeah, so that being said, tune in next week because we're going to talk about part 2, getting a business off the ground.
See ya. Hey everybody, this is Josh and Jared with the Vagrant Coffee HustleCast.
Tune in every Tuesday for new content at vagrantcoffee.com.
Please like and share and subscribe.
Drink Vagrant Coffee
and make life better.